Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week I sit down with a guest to talk about a Disney Plus offering of their choosing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, so if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it, but if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome, and of course, I would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with your friends. No guest this week. It's another solo show here for me. And for that, I wanted to sit down and talk about another... It's a show we've actually already covered on this particular series. I looked at a few more episodes of Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian. That's the kind of Disney Plus show behind the scenes making of the first season of The Mandalorian. Previously, I sat down with Cameron. We talked about the first few episodes of this series, discussing directing, legacy, and cast. That was back on episode 20 of That D Plus show. I'm flying solo this week, but I wanted to sit down because I watched the next three episodes 4 through 6 of this series, focusing on technology, practical, and process. And I thought it was some fascinating stuff, so I wanted to sit down for a quick... not too deep episode, but just kind of wanted to focus on some of the highlights from there. I don't really feel the need to dive into the history lesson and the who's who and whatnot because I tackled a lot of that last time we did. But just real quick, this was originally released May 4th. Is when kind of this series of episodes started getting released around the same time as another D Plus show called Prop Culture, which we've also done an episode of this show on. The episodes are 20 to 30 minutes each, and they are currently done releasing in the Disney timeline of things. But they basically released for about 8 weeks there, from May to June. The director of this series is Brad Barra, who had been a producer on some Marvel items like one-shots, like Item 47 and the Agent Carter one-shot. And he's also done a couple of documentary shorts about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then as far as kind of the who's who and starring of these, the documentary series here, you have Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, kind of the showrunners of The Mandalorian. You have some of the season 1 directors, Deborah Chow, Rick Famuyiwa. I screwed that up the first time too. Bryce Dallas Howard and Taika Waititi. You also have, of course, Kathleen Kennedy as kind of the overseeing executive producer of the Star Wars kind of brand these days. And then new voices in these series of episodes. The last episode we kind of talked about had some of the actors, and while they make appearances here and there in these trio, the real trio I want to kind of highlight in their stead this time around is Richard Bluff, who is a visual effects supervisor, John Knoll, who is the Industrial Light and Magic visual effects supervisor, and Hal Hickel, who's the animation director of the series. All of them kind of get a little bit more time around the round table that you have, like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni sitting around. I think it's the three of them, Filoni, Favreau, and Kathleen Kennedy, are kind of like one of the sets of round tables that they shot a lot of discussions around this. So just kind of going through these episodes, and trivia, there isn't too much on this show in particular. There will be much more when we actually sit down and do a discussion around the Mandalorian series as a whole. But for this, I just kind of wanted to talk through these 3 episodes that I sat down with: technology, practical, and process. So technology is all about kind of how Lucasfilm has always been kind of on the cutting edge of technology and always trying to push things forward. And the big showcase that The Mandalorian really features and gets a lot of feature across these 3 episodes is this state-of-the-art technology that they've kind of christened the Volume. And it's basically like a 360-degree room, it seems, of like LED screens that they can project kind of animatics and whatnot. And in doing so, they talk about how it's kind of the next evolution of like the green screen or blue screen technology, because when you're doing green screen or blue screen, you don't necessarily get the lighting right because they're going to put something in post that's going to be, it's going to have a dynamic that the people lighting the set that day and lighting the actors that day are not actually seeing. So what the volume allows and what kind of the wall of LED lights or LED screens allows is they show really cool kind of footage of the like they'll do a scene on Tatooine and the LED wall is the pre-rendered background in a game engine on Tatooine, and it's tied to the camera position. So as the camera moves, the what you're seeing on the LED wall moves as well, and they kind of show, in particular, some cases like the lava in the lava river in one of the later episodes of The Mandalorian. They kind of show, the cast in their makeshift boat, and all the LED walls and everything are showing kind of the lava cave moving alongside the camera, or along with the camera, and so it's basically that is the virtual background, but it's there physically and it's there on set, so the actors can see it and kind of react and respond to it. In addition to the people on set can light things appropriately, and they do a great mix of kind of blending real life props and set dressing and stuff to help build out the physical environment, but then around the LED here they have kind of the background. They talk about a lot of times they would have like part of the ship on set physically, but then the rest of it is just the LED screen, the volume representation of it. And they talk about having having fun playing the game, like, is that real or is that in the volume? And it looked really cool, just kind of the way they're using, in particular, one of the things I loved about this set of episodes is they talk very much about how the volume is basically a partnership with Epic Games, and it is using game engine technology to really try and move a lot of the stuff forward. A lot of the stuff Jon Favreau has been doing since the Jungle Book, and then with later with The Lion King and stuff. He'll get in there and he'll kind of like shoot a film in virtual reality, or he'll kind of like plot out a scene and map it out. He'll throw on, and they show kind of footage of it. He'll hop into like a VR headset, and he'll kind of like map out and say, this is where I want this kind of scene. Here's where I want the cameras to kind of play, and here's how I want to to play around with the scene. And it's really cool that they're kind of utilizing that and like thinking about it in terms of if you're playing a character in The Last of Us, which I've been playing the last few days, you're playing The Last of Us Part 2, and you turn Ellie, like the world gets created in milliseconds before your eyes, that isn't there. It's not like just sitting off camera or something like that. It is being visibly rendered. You can see this in some great kind of like GIFs and stuff. I remember first being blown away, really seeing how they did this kind of stuff with like Horizon Zero Dawn, where they would basically, you have like the whole world kind of like very loosely framed out, but only the stuff that's in the scope of the camera is ever being like physically rendered. And so as the camera moves, parts of the world that aren't being worried about are being gone, are being deleted, and they're making, they're rendering the world that you're now trying to look at. So what they're doing here with the volume is they're taking that same kind of technology and putting it into a live action space, so that if you're mapping out a set and a scene on Tatooine, you've got the canyons and the desert backdrop in this LED 360 degree wall that the set team can light, and if they wanted to change it to a nighttime scene or something on the day of shooting, they could have kind of the game engine kind of people come in, go into the code, move the sun in the visualization, turn it to like a nighttime scene, and then the physical lighting on set would adjust, and they would kind of turn it into a night scene, and so just a really cool way of how they are using technology once again to kind of put things forward. And even George Lucas kind of makes an appearance, because they brought him on set to look and see at this cool stuff, and it's the kind of things he was really trying and would have loved to have for the prequels, but the technology wasn't there yet. And so he was very excited to kind of get to see how they're using technology to continue pushing the scope of what kind of stories are possible in the Star Wars universe. So that was the technology episode. The practical episode, of course, on the complete flip side, very much gets, this is where the child, or Baby Yoda, gets a huge kind of a showcase, and really all the animatronics, also the kind of the Ugnaught, Quibble, whatever that character was. I forget its name at this point. But like that one gets was very much a physical kind of like on-set presence. And so yeah, they talk about how cool it was to get to do a lot of that practical effects for elements like that, especially for the child is really the one that they use to kind of showcase so much of its versatility as a puppet, and this is where they delve into the story that came out in the kind of the short aftermath of The Mandalorian, where Werner Herzog was very much fell in love with the child, with the puppet, and Deborah Chow kind of talks about how like he would be directing the puppet, because Werner Herzog is also a director and stuff, and so as an actor he was directing the puppet in the way that he might also direct another actor he's in a scene with or something like that, and the puppeteers are off kind of like trying to incorporate the things he's doing because the thing was just so lifelike and realistic. And this is also where you get that story of Werner Herzog basically when they would try and do a second shot with plates that would end up being like mapped out for visual effects or something like that. Werner Herzog this is where he would say they were a coward and they should commit to doing it with the physical puppet because it's so beautiful, and he even kind of talks in an interview to the camera about how it's magical, and it was really cool to see kind of all that and remember all those stories that were coming out when The Mandalorian came out and kind of see all that flooding back. And again, it just reminded me how much when those first episodes were coming out, I tweeted out something to the effect of like, all these people knew about Baby Yoda for months and never told any of us, and it's just like I'm angry that like Bill Burr knew about Baby Yoda for months more than I did, because once Baby Yoda was introduced into our lives, nothing was ever the same. And case in point, 2020 has had a significant lack of Baby Yoda, and 2020 has sucked a lot of ass. I'm just going to say that. But yeah, just again, the for these two episodes in particular, thinking about the technology, the historical like legacy of technology in Star Wars, as well as the legacy of the practical effects in Star Wars, is really cool. Kind of seeing them explore both of these cases across each of those episodes. And then the last episode that I actually just finished watching right before I sat down to record here is talking about the process, which is again very much built off of like the advancements in technology, and they talk about how for this series in particular, one of the things that they did was they basically they mapped out, like they had the scripts, and then they storyboarded everything, and then they did a previs run of the entire series of every episode. And a previs run basically is pre-visualization. That's it's like animatics and stuff like that, like CG animatics. So they show across the episode, they would kind of show like, here's what the thing looked like in previs, and then here's what the final scene looked like. And it was a way Jon Favreau talks in particular about how doing it that way let the directors commit to ideas early on. And if those ideas failed, they were easier and cheaper to fix back in the previs run of things, as opposed to when you've got 30 people around a set that you, like and trying it there and it not working. So really cool that they're kind of it's weird because they talk about this in the practical side of things too. The idea that that's somehow a cheaper method of doing things, that CG is a cheaper method than doing it stuff with miniatures and a lot of times real model stuff. It's like that blows my mind as somebody who grew up with like stuff like Independence Day, and going and seeing like on an IMAX screen a big documentary thing about the special effects teams and the pyrotechnics teams behind movies like Independence Day, building out those miniature models of the White House or of the Empire State Building or stuff like that, and then blowing them all up. It blows my mind that technology has become so much more efficient and effective that they can do all of that in technology and CGI and computers and stuff cheaper than they can building out a specific model or something like that. So the fact that they did the entire series in previs and had kind of CGI renders before they would show up on the day of a set, basically like that would help guide them get the shots they need to get on the day of. Jon Favreau and Taika Waititi both kind of talk about how a lot of the idea behind that is modeled off of the Marvel movie reshoots, in particular, because when you're going back for reshoots, they talk about like exactly what you're there to do. And so let's say Taika Waititi talked about on like Thor, when they went back for Thor Ragnarok reshoots, he said they did something like 350 shots over the course of like 5 days or something like that, which is absurd and crazy and whatnot. But they know exactly what they need in Marvel reshoot land, and so they've become a very efficient and well-oiled machine in doing that. And so Jon Favreau, having done the Iron Man films, very much was in the same boat of like doing all of this stuff in previs means that once you're there on the day of shooting, you already have a much better understanding and scope and idea of what the end product should look like. So you're that much closer to getting that end product by the end of the day, kind of thing. And so just again, a trio of really cool and very insightful episodes here of Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, basically behind the scenes on The Mandalorian, which again is a great show on Disney Plus. I know some people kind of are a little bit more hit or miss on it, but I loved it from start to finish, and getting to dive into kind of a lot of the stories behind the technology of this, getting to see Jon Favreau throw on like VR headsets and block out a scene, or stunt guys kind of wearing mocap suits to block out a fight sequence that then gets taken into previs, and then that previs basically gets turned into and done through the live action stuff, and you get to see basically how it plays out from kind of start to finish, and you get to see each of the steps throughout the process. Just really cool stuff, and I really enjoyed it. So if you're not checking out Disney Gallery The Mandalorian, I highly recommend it. I don't remember what I gave the first set of episodes, but I gave these 3 episodes an A. I thought it was, again, just really cool, really smart and insightful stuff from very smart and insightful people involved in the production. So definitely check it out if you have not, or if you are not already checking it out. There are 2 other episodes that I have not, that we've not yet covered here on that D Plus show for Score and Connections. There may be ultimately somewhere down the line, basically when I need to do another filler episode of that D Plus show, I might do a Disney Gallery The Mandalorian Part 3 that tackles those last couple episodes. But definitely check out this show. Extra credit, same as the extra credit last time around. Of course, The Mandalorian being the first and foremost. If you like this series, hopefully you'll have already seen The Mandalorian. Otherwise, you also have Empire of Dreams, the Star Wars documentary, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, the Clone Wars film, Star Wars Rebels, and A New Hope. So that's it. I know I don't have any extracurriculars because really I've been head down into The Last of Us Part 2 the last few days, so this was just something I could kind of hop in pretty quickly to sit down, watch these episodes, and crank out a quick episode here of That D Plus Show for you. So that's going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you for joining me. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter. You can follow all of the latest from That Nerdy Site over at thatnerdysite.com. If you are a fan of Persona 5 Royal, Cameron, Frank, and I sat down and did a spoiler cast episode of that show, of that Nerdy Site show, talking about Persona 5 Royal. Dove into that for a couple hours. It was great getting to sit down and chat with those guys about that. So check that out on the site. If you would like to be on the show, you can go to thatnerdysite.com/D+guest and fill out the little Google form there to let me know kind of what Disney Plus offering you would like to chat about, or just hit me up on Twitter. That's also a good way of doing things, just to keep things on my radar, because I'm admittedly not always great about checking that form as diligently as I should, and I definitely still have people on that form that have been on that form for months that I need to reach out and try and coordinate with. So apologies for slipping and slacking on that. But if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, and all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always help support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining me, no us this time around. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other. Class dismissed.